Subscribe to our YouTube channel for in-depth interviews of India Inc. and press the bell icon so that you do not miss our updates.
Hello and welcome to Nirmabang, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hiral Datia. We have with us Satyanarayanan, Chairman and Founder at CL Educate, joining us on the show. It's a pleasure to have you on the show, Satya, and a very warm welcome. My first question coming to you is across industries, across economies, everyone's really spoken about the kind of impact that we've seen in terms of business. If you have to talk about the education sector right now as a whole, what has been the major negative impact that we've seen since lockdown began?
I would point out two specific significant negative impacts that have affected children and parents and practically everybody. Number one is that the entire calendar has gone completely astray. You know, the entrance exams have not been happening. It's a massive health risk, in addition to being a logistical nightmare. To be able to do an exam online, it's not easily possible. So one is that the whole calendar of exams, results, admissions into the next stage that has gone, that has got completely derailed. And the other is, even in terms of learnings, while the students and the teachers have with great amount of courage and enthusiasm embraced the challenge of graduating to online. But I think the fun of going to a school or a college, meeting friends, you know, all that, what is the socio emotional need that are met by education as an experience, that has gotten affected massively in the last 4 months.
Right. And with this, a couple of things what have happened is in terms of the impact for education as a sector, at least it's not only been negative, there are a lot of positives that have emerged as well as a blessing in disguise. If we have to look at the positives and fade away the negatives, what would they be?
See, when we look at education, at least there are three different stages of education, and each one operates or responds or behaves differently. One is the K-12, the children right till the age of grade 12 or age 17 and 18. That is one. The other is the uh, higher education, and the third are the bridges or the jumps between undergrad to postgrad, and second is from school to undergrad. If you take these three, what definitely one has seen, which has been common all across, is that the transformation, the digital transformation of education, I think it's gotten fast forwarded by 3 to 5 years in these 3 months. I think it's a great positive. I would look at it. It has its own negative side to it, but it's a great positive because for a country such as India, the leapfrogging of both access and quality of education cannot be achieved by keeping costs low without digital penetration. So that has put a very strong forcing function on everybody to embrace digital way of transacting education, whether it is universities, colleges, schools, test conducting bodies, or parents and children. I think if you ask me, one single biggest benefit that has happened out of this, it's this: various things that we can discuss can be linked back to something like this. That's the single most important positive benefit that I would say.
Right. So overall, with all of this, if you have to talk about CL Educate as well, what's been the impact in terms of business?
Uh, I think it can be summarized uh, very simply into a couple of points. The offline online combination pre-COVID was something like 1090 or 1585, which means 15% of the students were purely online, 85% were a mix blended, but they would come for a face-to-face program, whether the student is coming in at our Dadar center in Bombay or Gurugram or Rajaji Nagar in Bangalore or Varanasi. So that 1585 has now become 8515 or 9010.
Okay.
Okay, and even that 10 uh, is practically not there today. 100% of the students are digital online across all three activities: discovery, enrollment, fulfillment, and going away. Everything is digital. That's the massive transformation that has happened.
Mm.
When COVID goes away, a part of the premium face-to-face seeking ratio will come back, but it is unlikely to go back to 1585. It's likely to be a 60-40 or 70-30, but digital is now become digital first and premium later.
Mm. Right. So, when you say this, it seems as if there's a major shift that's happening in terms of business strategy. And I think all businesses are relooking at their business models,
Yeah,
relooking at what is the strategy that they need to adopt, because no one is really able to plan really in advance right now.
yeah.
Everyone is taking by the tea as to how the next 1 month, how the next probably 3 months are going to look like. So, if you have to see in terms of business strategy, is this what is going to be the major shift? Because already the model itself, without you making an effort, has reversed. So, in terms of strategy, how are you going to change it?
You see, the way you view the opportunity, the way you view the business, that prism itself has changed,
Absolutely.
which means that the key performance indicators that you are looking at, the goal, that has changed.
Hmm.
When I say that, as classically they say, there is goal, there is a strategy, and there is a structure to the strategy. All of them have to be aligned. So when you are now looking at the new ways of doing businesses, volume growth, traffic, ARPU, what is the average revenue per student, what is the profitability? I think that the sequence in which you would look at it, that has changed dramatically, because the when you come digital, the natural expectation is that the prices will drop, and which means that you may and we are seeing massive growth in volume, in numbers, but the ARPU is dropping, or ASP, whatever you want to call it, average revenue per customer or average sales price that you can charge, that is dropping. However, one very interesting thing that we are seeing is that the request or a demand for premium one-to-one service programs or small group service programs digitally also, that is going up. It's personalized tutoring that is seeing a lot of uptake and demand. And when you look around the success stories, you find that they have been able to respond with personalized coaching and tutoring, even digitally. Coming back to the other couple of changes, because of this change that is happening, everything is digital now. Some roles within the organization are going away. For example, if I speak for CL Educate, we had 150 centers that are working. There was something called as a center staff. So the center staff hasn't been coming. Faculty, they would come to a centers to teach. They've been teaching from their homes. The center staff is addressing the students needs from their homes. So there is a rapid and very dramatic transformation of functions and roles in organizations. And that itself is leading to the organogram, the organization structure, the design of the organization changing significantly, with digital functions becoming more important with product functions becoming more important and the geographical functions becoming less important.
Mm. Right. So, with all of this, going ahead, which segments of business will be growth drivers from here on?
As far as CL is concerned,
Mm.
our our flagships I think will continue to grow, which is MBA, law, and IPM, the undergrad management program. But the biggest growth that we are seeing is in the UPSC and the government segment, number one. And the second is the GATE segment. As you know, GATE is an exam that is taken to go from undergrad to postgrad in
Right.
engineering, and also to grow from engineering to jobs, especially in public sector. And the government has also announced the NRA couple of weeks ago, National Recruitment Agency. So this entire government uh, job giving, which includes UPSC, RBI, banking, financial services, engineering services. I think this is the one that is seeing the biggest growth, followed by children in the age group of 10 to 15, where there is a need for mathematics and sciences. That's the other one that is seeing a lot of traction.
Right. So again, from here on, because physical education is something which has come to a standstill,
Yeah.
what are the kind of cost-cutting measures that you've taken, especially if you think on the rent side, on the travel side, how is that equation working?
I think there is a, in short numbers wise, there is a dramatic drop. We have, I think the overheads in terms of rentals, travel, all of those have dropped by more than 50% in this COVID period. But the way I would look at it is not necessarily cost cutting, but it's
Mm,
about cost reorganization.
correct.
Since some functions or some areas are not needed, that's going to completely go away, reducing costs dramatically in some areas of the business or earlier costs. At the same time, it also calls for investment, if you will, in some other areas such as digital marketing, using data sciences, using artificial intelligence, those kinds of things where you want your technology and marketing now to be far more digital, that would call for some investment. But in some, costs have dropped between anywhere between 25 to 60% across different functions, while a couple of newer investment areas have emerged.
Right. So overall, with all of these initiatives that you've taken in terms of rejigging, reallocations, do you think we will see any uh, margin expansion, or do you think we will be able to maintain the current margin structure?
I think margins will and must expand,
Mm,
especially if your CAC, if you have healthy customer acquisition costs. If you're a
mm,
company that was an EBITDA positive company in the pre-COVID era, in post-COVID, your EBITDA margins will and must expand. That is what we will see in CL. Uh, However, I think there will be a drop in revenues.
mhm.
There would be growth in volumes, but there would be drop in revenues. So at an overall level, the amount of profits can be retained with significant amount of talent, but the percentage of EBITDA or percentage of margins will expand in this digital crisis or a digital opportunity era.
Right. And overall, do you think because everything's moving digital right now, digital spends on the marketing front is something which could be increasing?
Yes. Uh, However, uh, the the conventional marketing that used to happen earlier,
Mm,
that has dropped down to zero. So if there was a conventional marketing, which is newspapers and outdoors and all of that, and then the digital. If you merge the two wallet shares of marketing, it could remain the same. But you are right, digital marketing will increase in two forms. One is the amount of money you're spending as advertising. Number two, the kind of lead generation, curation, initiatives, engagement models that you're going to do, which for which product development, investment in people and technology, cloud consumption has gone up. All those things are increasing significantly.
Right. And so if you have to look at FY21 and 22, 2 years, because some sectors are of the opinion that we will have to really ignore FY21,
Yeah.
look at 22 directly as to what planning we need to do. So if you have to look at both these years, what is the kind of growth or degrowth you're envisaging in terms of the top line?
I think a top line shrinkage of 25 to 40%, depending upon which sub-segment you are talking about. To me, that's a given. That's a given.
Right.
Uh, the margin expansions can help you safeguard. Not all of it will go into loss of profits, is something that we are seeing. Uh, However, the other point that you made also is very valid, that some of the programs, especially in the 2021 years plus segment of coaching, test prep, careers, uh, that might come back a little sooner. Uh, and when I say that, I still mean 1 year. But the undergrad programs where children are in the age group of 14, 15, 16, 17, preparing from school to college prep, that is, I think, the 2022 will be the time when we will be talking about near normalcy getting restored. It's 1 to 2 year journey of this disruption that we must all brace ourselves for.
Right. And another concern that I have right now with regards to digital education is with regards to the number of people that have access to the internet. In fact, I was just reading a report by the UNICEF which was saying that only 24% of Indian households have internet connections to access e-education. And probably there is a large rural urban and gender divide that probably will likely widen the learning gap across, say, high, middle, and low income families. Now, if that happens, do you think something needs to be done from, say, corporate India's side, from the government side together to see to it that, the remainder of the people who do not have access, somehow their learning process, learning curve continues? Anything you think is possible on that front?
What I'm going to say might sound counterintuitive, uh, though your observation as a data is right. You know, in the Delhi region, and Delhi also has rural and absolutely
Correct.
tier 3, tier 4 levels of population. We did a rapid transformation and education uninterrupted program for government schools with the Delhi government, and we did it free of cost. We did not charge any money from the Delhi government, and it was funded by Intel and Amazon, AWS. Okay, and our data said that about 25 to 30% of the students did not have access to the devices. Okay, uh, the interesting thing is that we never asked that question in the pre-COVID era.
Mm.
In the pre-COVID era, also the access was equally bad, perhaps worse. So the interesting thing is that it's at least showing the mirror to us, and it is showing us the amount of work that we need to do. The
Right.
moment the moment you recognize that, to overcome the chasm, the gulf between the haves and have-nots, with digital assets, with corporate participation, where Indian CSR is 40 to 50,000 crores per year, it's actually much easier to bridge the gap than in the conventional era, because even when you have all the resources, devices, bandwidth, everything, the key thing to note is that the child needs an appropriate peer group and the child needs a good teacher to teach him. So if in Begussarai or in Kurnool district of Andhra Pradesh, if I'm not able to get great resources, chances are that the most important resource is the right peer group and the right teacher.
Right.
Digitally, you can make it a level playing field for everybody. And device as a problem, just as a closing remark to this question, access as a problem is not limited to only in India. You talk to the top guys, education guys in the US,
Mm.
then there they're dealing with the problem of access. The numbers are more pronounced here, less pronounced there, but that can be overcome in a couple of years if the education policy makers and education leaders and corporates, they join hands. It can be done effortlessly. We did that. 1.8 lakh class 12 students were taught by the best teachers of the Delhi government schools themselves, and the children were accessing the classes from their homes at their choice of time, and the attendance was between 85 to 95% access within 48 hours of the classes happening. So it all sounds very counterintuitive, but the real data ends up surprising us, because the hunger for education is there in India and it is culturally valued, as you know.
Right. So with this, another good thing that's happened overall right now is with regards to the new education policy that has been announced, and that's one of the best things that everyone is talking about on the education side. What's your view of the policy, firstly, that has been announced?
Uh, I wish that the policy was a 8-page document and not a 800-page document. Okay, because for a country like India, when you write a 800-page document, you actually have practically pleased everybody,
Mm.
and you also displeased everybody, because I liked one chapter or one paragraph that I had espoused, but some things I don't like. Okay.
Mm.
But we live in a country of 1.3 billion, so we must be fair to the policy writers. It's a good directional document. Having said that, I would reiterate the point that if you want to make a telling difference as a policy maker, you should be able to say, in school education, we will do these two things.
Mm.
In college education, we will do these two things. Okay. And I think that is where I hope that there are a couple of things that are done. For example, uh, the unification of exams and unification of education to jobs,
Mm.
these, these two must be done on a war footing. So the good news is that National Testing Agency is already in operation, and it has begun to take over the exams conduction, because it's a very specialized field. You cannot hope CBSE to run the board for education and also conduct an examination for engineering and NEET. It's a very super specialized area.
Mm.
So a specialized agency conducting one single examination at the class 12th level, and I hope that it will become more aptitude driven in order to make it valuable for the Indian lower middle class and the poor kids who don't need IIT JEE of this kind. We should adopt the way CAT is, the way CLAT is, the way IPM exams are to get into IIMs at the undergrad levels are. It must be an aptitude exam, one exam for any child who's getting out of class 12 to go into any college. Very similar to the way SAT is in the US. You have SAT, GMAT, GRE. So I would say unification of tests and the freedom for the child to take the exam any time of the year. I think if we do this one thing, it will go on and ease a whole lot of important transition points. That is where our dropout rates become very, very pronounced.
Hmm.
So if I were to reduce the 800-page document into couple of bullets, I would focus on this. There are a whole lot of things, but that's a long discussion in itself.
Right. And overall as well, if you talk about the national education policy, which has been announced as well right now, do you think a lot of things that have been missed out? Because if you see uh, probably villages, tier 3, tier 4 cities as well, especially the rural side, the ones which are schools are not even schools, they're just sheds that we see.
Mhm.
Do you think stuff like this is something which need to be accommodated in the new policy where, because when you're making things simpler, easier, you're accommodating a lot more in the policy in terms of learnings, but the schools which do not have infrastructure, I mean, libraries and computers are off the hook already. I mean, that's a far-fetched dream for all of them. So do you think stuff like this on the infrastructure side should have been accommodated as well?
See, as you know, education is a state subject in India. The central government or MHRD can't do anything more than be the guide
Hmm.
and set the path, set up a new narrative. That's all MHRD can do. Okay, the implementation, the budget, the money, everything comes from the state government.
Hmm.
The other important thing is that India is not short on money at all as far as education is concerned. It's a myth. Uh, I was I chaired the education policy making body of the Delhi government in 2014. We were a group of 5 people who were invited to do, and we took the budgetary spend of education. We took it from about 6% to 23% in one shot,
Hmm.
and it was implemented very well. And some of the states are doing a good job. Today, money is not a problem. If you ask me, take any state, and the first budgetary item they can put away is 6 to 8% of their state budget to education and implement it in a very, very militant manner. I think that can be done. Where they have failed for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years is that the education minister invariably doesn't is not among the top 10 guys for the finance minister. And if that
Correct.
can happen, and the implementation, I think the last mile is the key. Implementation can, if it is done, that's not an issue. Budgets are not an issue. Investment now has to be doubled down on digital infrastructure.
Hmm.
So, in some broader sense, what people now say is, compared to let's say a 1995 or 2005 to this period, that India has largely solved the problem of access. Now India is grappling with the problem of excellence, and for that, this digital backbone, digital investment, that thing has to be done with a lot more proactivity and aggression.
Right. So with the new education policy, how do you think business will change for education companies in terms of how the curriculum is made? Secondly, in terms of their training, the staff is concerned, from the teachers front. Do you think all of that will be an added cost as well? And that's something which, I mean, obviously it is somewhere going to be a one-time cost that companies will have to incur. But do you think
Mhm.
that's something, I mean, any estimates on that front?
Yeah, I think additional costs of let's say 3 to 5% additional costs on capacity building internally must be provided for. If you ask me, I'm just taking a
Mhm.
ballpark figure. I think more important than that, Viral, is the ability to respond to this in terms of mindset, competence, leadership, it may turn out to be not as much a question of amount of money, but the leadership capability to lead the organization or the institution into this new world where it is going to be digital first, and that is the reason for which there is going to be a whole lot of disruption in the seedings, in the rankings. Many universities globally will collapse. University shapes will change. A whole lot of recalibration, rediscovery, redesigning, all of that will happen in the next 24 to 36 months, in my view.
Right. So that's something that I think everyone's going to watch out for as well, because times are changing, businesses are changing, way of doing business is changing, and I think everyone's looking to embrace all of them. But thank you so much, Satya, for joining us on the show. It was a pleasure to have this discussion with you. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well, and we will see you soon again, once things improve from here on. But stay safe, and thank you from Nirmal Bang.
Thank you very much, Hiral. Thanks for having me here. I enjoyed the conversation. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.